Okay, Shavua Tov, we're on Daf Chaf, what is that? Chaf Beis, Chaf Gimel Amud Beis. And the subject is the middle of Asal Behema, Daf from the Sukkah. Could use an animal to be a wall of a Sukkah. And that's different than the Mishnah's case. The Mishnah's case was Al-Gabe Behema. That was the definition we spoke about earlier, that it's not Roy L'Shiva, because since you're not allowed to use it on Yontif and Shabbos, so does that make that it's not Roy L'Shiva and it's not even good on the weekday? That was the previous Machlokas we paskin, like our Mishnah, that it is kosher. You don't have to have, like we says, that since with the rice it's Roy, it's good enough. Now, in Nusugya, and this was about the wall, not holding up the schach, and nothing to do with Roy L'Shiva. It is Roy L'Shiva. Is there anything wrong with having an animal for a wall? So the Mishnah, the Brisa said that it's Machlokas Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda. Rav Meir says it's possible. Rav Yehuda says it's machshir. We're trying to figure out why Rav Meir says that it's possible. So far we had Machlokas of Bain Rav Zera, if Shema Thomas or Shema Tivrach. Rav Zera said Shema Tivrach, and the Gemara came out, everybody holds Shema Tivrach. Of course, if it's not going to be tied up, some might walk away. And of course, it's not definitely possible, because of course when it walks away, okay, I have no sukkah now, but the chash is Shema Tivrach. Maybe he's not going to realize that it walked away and the still continue using it. Everybody's not choshish for that. I think that's the pashup shot. But Abaye says that besides that, there's also chash Shema Tammuz. Besides, it might run away, which would be solved by just tying it up. There's also chash maybe it's going to die. And that the Gemara continued that even if it's not dead, it might sit down. Even if you're just choshish that it's going to fall when it dies. So even if it's alive, it also could sit down. And the Gemara says it must be talking about that it's held up by suspended by ropes. If it's suspended by ropes, so then what's the problem if it's going to die? And the Gemara said the possibility would be that it's only a 10th Tfachim Sukkah, and it's the animal is 7 Tfachim plus, and it's lovewood, and if the animal's going to die, it might shrink, and you won't realize it, and you won't have a machitza. Of course, it's very dochuk, but the Gemara at this point is still willing to tolerate the dochak, and that would be the machlokas between Abaya and Rabbi Zera. Agav, the Gemara also said that between the feet, that it's a big space, it's more than 3 tfachim from the ground till the abdomen of the animal, that wouldn't be a good machitza even while it's standing. It must be that it's filled in with husa badafna, some kind of leaves and branches in order to fill up that gap. The Gemara started on top of Amud Beis over here, Chav Gimel Amud Beis. Is that true? I have the wrong daf on 1 second, 1 second over here. Yeah, this is the Gemara Chav Gimel Amud Beis, and the Gemara was surprised that Rav Meir is Chayish Lamisa. Abai says Rav Meir is Choshish for death and Rav Yehuda is not, and the Gemara brought that Abai himself seemed to have said that in this issue, Choshish, someone's going to die. It seems to be a machlokas of Rav Meir and Rav Yehuda, and Abai said Rav Meir is not Chayish Lamisa. That case over there was if a woman's married to a Kohen, the Bas Yisrael is married to a Kohen, is she allowed to eat truma? They have two scenarios over here, but it comes back down to the same thing, that a Choshish, the husband's going to die. The first case was that the husband went away, he went overseas, and the woman wants to know if she's allowed to eat truma, can she assume her husband's still alive? And it said yes, she may continue eating truma, assuming that her husband's alive. On the other hand, it said if someone gave a get to his wife, that should take effect only an hour before he dies, it says she's not allowed to eat truma because he might die within the hour, and then it comes out that she was not allowed to eat truma. And that's a contradiction. And Abaye said, Rav Meir is not Choshish Lamisa, Rav Yehuda is Choshish Lamisa, and it brought down this brisa about being able to drink wine of Tevel by being mafresh Trumas and Maasros, what I'm going to separate later, which has to do with Breira, that later on we'll see soon about Breira, that I'm going to drink now from the beginning, from any part of the bottle. I'll drink, and then I'll leave over at the end the tithings that are necessary, whatever it's going to be, 2% plus 10% plus another 10%, I'll leave over at the end. And Breira tells us that's legal, that I could decide later on what's the truma that I did right now. Right now I'm mafresh truma. I declare truma, whatever I'm going to separate later. But then this brisa talks about, that's as far as we got. We'll start again from the Tanya, and we'll continue on to where we didn't continue on Friday. So the Gemara is being arrived that Rav Yehuda is choshish for death and Rav Meir is not. What does it say? Somebody bought wine from Kusim. Kusim, Rashi says usually will say Amay Haaretz, that then they're chashud, they're suspect that they don't tie it properly. And really, for our purposes, it could be Amor. That's the reason why it says Kusim. Rashi says yet choshed on Truma also, that the regular Amor is not suspect on Truma, only on Meiser, but not on the Trumas. And here Kusi is even suspect even on Trumas. But that's the side they should not negate to us. In short, let's talk about a case we have to be mafresh Trumas and Meisers. Why can't you do it into a cup? Either you have no cup, or it's Erev Shabbos right before Shah, you have no time to do it. So it says that you're allowed to declare right now is Truma and Meiser, whatever I'm going to separate later. Omer, he says the following: that he says the two out of the 100, he has 100 lug, a barrel of 100 lug. He says the two that I'm going to leave over at the end is going to be truma. Right now it should be truma. And the 10 that I'm going to leave over eventually is going to be Ma'aser Rishon. And the 9, after he takes off 10, he only has 90 left. So 10% of that is 9. So the 9 that I'm going to leave over is going to be Ma'aser Sheni. So right away he declares now what he's going to separate later. And he's allowed to drink it down already. Umechal v'shosam yad. Rashi says mechal means that he's mechalel. The Ma'aser Sheni, that he's able to transfer the kedusha, is even better to do that also. Others learn mechal means maschal, that he starts drinking right away. Anyway, he says Rameir says no problem. Divra Rameir, that's as far as we got. Rameir says there's no problem to drink now and declare now and drink now, and later on he'll do the actual tithing that will take effect retroactively. But the Brisa continues now. Rav Yehuda, Rav Yossi, Rav Shimon Osrim, they say that you're not allowed to. And the Gemara is going to soon says the reason why they say not is because maybe the barrel is going to break. Shami Yibaka Nod. So it means even though he drinks now and he says I'm going to take off eventually, but maybe not. Maybe it's going to break. If it breaks, he never took off Shumas and Maasros later on, so retroactively nothing happened, and it's tebel. So that seems the Gemara puts together all these chashashas. Somebody's going to die, it's going to break. The Gemara doesn't differentiate at this point. So the Gemara shows over here that Abai himself said that Rameir is not choshish for the barrel breaking, and Rav Yehuda is choshish for the barrel breaking. So too, by death, Rameir should be the one who's not choshish for death, and Rav Yehuda is the one who's choshish for death. But Abai said a second ago, by the case of making an animal to be the wall of a sukkah, Rabbi Yemeir was the one who's choshish for death. That's what Abai said. Abai said, Rameir says, don't use an animal for a wall because you might be hanging up an animal over there, suspending an animal which might die, and then it's going to shrink, and you're not going to realize that it's not loved anymore. And Rav Yehuda is not choshish for that. So it's a contradiction in Abai. So the Gemara at this point says, top line, epoch. So we switch around this terrace we just said now, over here. Let's just go back a second. The Amr Abaye, this on this page before, I just turned back a second ago. Amr Abaye, lo kasha the lo chayish lemisa, the chayish lemisa. That the Gemara is saying now was a mistake. It was misquoted. Abaye did say, lo kasha, one is Rameir, one is Rabbi Yehuda, but who says what? We'll change it around. Rameir is the one who is chayish lemisa. Rabbi Yehuda is the one who is not chayish lemisa. And to go back again to our new daf, and according to this new gersa, that Rameir is the one who's chayish lemisa, where's going to be the fruit of Rameir chayish lemisa? Not for the case of the wine by the kusum over there, because on the contrary, it sounds like Rameir is not. We're going to have to answer that up in a second. But there's to point out where do you see Rameir chayish lemisa? We come back to our subject, the Tanya, Asa lebem with the sukkah, Rameir posel, we the marshir. That this case itself we're talking about, that Rameir says don't use the animal for the wall, and we're saying the reason is because his choshish is going to die. That's the source. Rameir says choshish for death, and so too by the Kohen's wife, she wouldn't be allowed to eat truma because he has to be choshish. Maybe the husband's going to die unless he's right in front of her and she sees that he's alive. Then and they're married, so then she's allowed to drink. But if not, then she can't assume that he's alive. Maybe he died. At this point, the Gemara still has to reconcile that the brisa with the wine of the kusum over there seems to say the opposite. Over there it says that Rameir is the one who permits it, and he's not choshish the barrel is going to break, and Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says the barrel is going to break. So if anything, it's a contradiction now because both Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda, they changed their opinions. Before, Rameir is the one who's not choshish, and who is choshish lamisa, and over here by the wine he's not choshish, and Rabbi Yehuda is the opposite. Before he was not choshish, now he is choshish. Maybe the barrel is going to break. That's the most kasha now. Kasha. The Rav Meir, and the more soon going to ask also Kasha Rav Yehuda. Both of them seem to themselves. It's not a good comparison to say that a barrel breaking is the same as death. A barrel breaking, you're not choshish. And not choshish, the barrel is going to break. Like it says, but people do die. So I'm choshish more. People, of course, barrels break also. But he says, I'm choshish more for death. It's not necessarily the same subject. So even though Rav Meir says, I am choshish, the animal's going to die, or the person's going to die, but I'm not choshish, the barrel's going to break. Why? He can give over the barrel to be watched. A person, as much as they try, they can't keep somebody alive. Like if he's supposed to die, he's going to die. Of course, there's all kinds of license for it and paramedics, but not everything. Sometimes a person's supposed to die, he's going to die. But the barrel, you could take care that it shouldn't break. So the Gemara is satisfied at this point. Rav Meir is choshish lamisa. He's not choshish for the barrel breaking. However, Rabbi Yehuda is also kasha Rabbi Yehuda because he's the one who said that you're not choshish for death by the animal over there. And we're going to say also, and what are we saying also? That he's not choshish for death by the truma. He's not choshish for death, and by the barrel breaking, he is choshish. But there he said, don't do this thing with the truma to drink drink it now and then separate later. Maybe the barrel's going to break. So, and the Gemara at this point holds that it's more of you have to be more nervous that a person's going to die than the barrel's going to break. The barrel you could control, you could watch that it shouldn't break. So if Rabbi Yehuda is choshish for the barrel breaking, he surely should be choshish for the person dying. The Gemara says Rabbi Yehuda never meant to say that. Time of Rabbi Yehuda, go to the top line over here. Time of Rabbi Yehuda, la mishum t'chayish l'b'kiyas tanod. The reason why Rabbi Yehuda says not to drink now and tithe later is not because he's choshish the barrel's going to break. Let me show him the lesson that in halachically, inherently, he holds he can't do it, not because something might happen, but he holds he can't do burial. What does burial mean? I'm going to drink now. We ask him, I says, I'm declaring the 2 and the 10 and the 9, I'm declaring it to be Trumas and Maestros. Which ones? We ask him, which one can you point it to, please? He says, no, I can't point to it. I don't know. I'm going to drink now, and then whatever I leave over, that's what's going to be. That's a concept called burial, that I'll be able to decide later what I meant before. That's not so simple that it works, that it halachically works. So according to this, the Gemara says, the reason why he says he can't do it is not because Achshash Baal is going to break, but because it doesn't work, because he doesn't know this concept called burial. But the Gemara says, the Bryce says Beferish over there, that the reason why Abuda says don't do it is because of the barrel is going to break. If you want to say Abuda is not choshish that the barrel is going to break, he says right there. The name says that shows to follow Lamafreya. The end of that verse over there where it talks about could you drink now and separate later, Rabbi says you may. Every day Hashem say you may not, but the discussion continues. Over there they told Rabbi, aren't you choshish that maybe the barrel is going to break, and it comes out that he ate Tevel retroactively because he wasn't able to take off Tevel. And Rabbi said, look, Shei Baka, like if it happens. That's another way of saying I'm not choshish is going to happen. If it happens, come ask me. That's another way of saying I'm not choshish. So it says beferish. The reason I have you this because maybe the barrel's going to break. What are you telling me? The lumdus is because no breira. It's because he holds the barrel's going to break. If the barrel's going to break, it should also be choshish. The person's going to die, and the animal's going to die in these cases. And you have a contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara says no. Rabbi Yehuda was not talking his own language. Hasam. Rabbi Yehuda, who the Kamal of Meir, the Didi Leslie breira. Over there, Rabbi Yehuda is really just talking about the opposition. He's talking theoretical to his opposition. He's saying I hold you shouldn't do it. You shouldn't drink now and separate later, tithe later, because I hold you can't do it because there's no brera. You hold the brera. You hold you could do it. But at least because there's another technical problem. Maybe the barrel's going to break. Aren't you scared? Really means the shitascha. Abud himself is not choshish the barrel's going to break, as we just said. He's not choshish lamisa, but he's allowed to ask for mayor. I know that you hold in other places that you're choshish lamisa. So even though you hold brera is not a problem, but you should hold that maybe the barrel's going to break. So he told him, that you hold the brera and you're not choshish teshami baka nod. I'm not choshish. So at this point, the Gemara is happy again. The Gemara goes back to the original teretz that we explained. Abaye says Rabbi Meir is choshish from Isa, and Rabbi Yehuda is the one who's not choshish from Isa. And again, the point of the Dauphin was saying is the chashash that it's going to shrink, he's not going to realize. And Rabbi Yehuda is not choshish. The Gemara is another kasha also, and this issue about choshish from Isa, that now we're saying Rabbi Yehuda is not choshish. We do find in Maseches Yoma, we had this in the beginning of the Masechta, v'lo chayish Rabbi Yehuda lamisa, v'atan Rabbi Yehuda omer, afish acheres maskina lo Hashem b'tamas ishto. Famous that it says by Yom Kippur that the Kohen Gadol that has to have a wife on Yom Kippur, like it says v'chiper ba'ado v'ad beiso, beiso zawishto. So it says that besides getting a Kohen Gadol on deck, that maybe the Kohen Gadol is going to become tamei, they also get another wife for the Kohen Gadol on deck in case his wife dies, that he should have a wife. So the more they went into all the details of what you have to do in order that he should have a wife on deck and not two wives. That was the issue over there in Maseches Yoma. But anyway, what did it say? Rabbi Yehuda is choshish that maybe his wife's going to die. He just told me the whole time that Rabbi Yehuda holds you not choshish lamisa over here by the animal, and also the case of the Kohen's wife. And here you're saying by the Kohen's wife by Truma, and here the Kohen Gadol's wife by Yom Kippur. You say Yah choshish b'tamas ishto. But the one says that's not a kasha. That's an exception over there. Really, according to the regular laws, we wouldn't be choshish. Just the kapar Yom Kippur to make sure that everything goes. They have to be extra careful. But it doesn't go according to the regular kidarim, the regular parameters of chash. Really would say I'm not choshish from misa over there. I'm choshish from misa. But now, after all this, the Gemara tried hard to get pshat in Rabbi Meir. Both the chash of Shema Yivra, Shema Yamos, we went through the whole sugya, and we came out possible pshat, but the Gemara now knocks down the whole thing. Top line, Bein Madama Shema Tomus, Bein Madama Shema Tivrach, Midaraisa Mechitz Maliyah. You're saying right now that Midaraisa is a good partition as for sukkah, but there's a chash, maybe it's going to run away, maybe it's going to die. Rabbanu the Gaza, but Rabbanan said Xeris, maybe it's a problem, but that doesn't explain 1 out of the 4 cases. Over there it says that Meir holds that it's not a machitza for a sukkah, it's not a lachi for a mavoi, it's not possibly rose. All that's fine. That maybe with Rabbanan it's going to fall down, it's going to die, it's going to run away. But it says over there a fourth thing. It says about Tumas Golel. It says that if you made a Golel, we said the other day that Rashi says a Golel is the cover of the coffin, or maybe the cover of the kever. We said a more archaeological shot that maybe it's the stone that they rolled in front of the entrance to the cave of graves. Whatever it is, over there it says that Rameh holds is also not a Golel. Why not? If you're saying the real leaders of Mechitza, for all Dina Mechitza, that's the Mechitza Madaraisa, that's what Rabbanan might walk away. That's the only reason to be Machmir. Like all the other cases are Chumras. We say don't use it for a wall of a sukkah, don't use it for a lechi, don't use it for Pasibiros. But by Golel, how could he say that it's a Kula? He's saying a leniency that it doesn't have too much Golel. If it's a legal Golel, then it should become Tameh. You can't say Rabbanan it's not Tameh. If the rice that's Tameh, then one can only be Machmir. They can't be more lenient. So that's the Kasha. Elamayat, the Rameh, Tameh Mishum Golel. He should have held that as Tamei Golel, and the Brisa says that it's not. The truth is that the Gemara brought down the Brisa again before that Chav Gimel and Alpha said in the whole list. It said Dof on the Sukkah, Lachi, and the Pasi Biros, and Tumas Golel. It said that already. We had it yesterday. But the Gemara wants to bring a Mishnah. Rashi says the Gemara could have brought the Brisa, but it brings a Mishnah over here. Allah Tanan, that B'Yudim Tamei Mishum Golel, but Mei Matayah. So that's the kasha. That all these reasons don't suffice. And the whole thing falls off. The whole doubt falls off now. The reason of a mayor is not going to be because maybe he's going to run away, maybe he's going to die, because he says this also it's not even a gola, which is a leniency, and it can't be lenient on the chash. It wouldn't make any sense. So the Gemara changes the whole shot. Now, noob shot, so delete everything. Don't forget it because it's always good to remember the Havin of the Gemara also. But as far as the shot over here, there's a lach in Hilchos Mechitzas that it's not called a partition only if it's standing with ruach. If it's standing by ruach. So here the case of the ruach is ruach chaim, that it's the spirit of life. Since you need spirit of life in order that it should stand up, that's not called a mechitza. Rashi seems to say the reason is because the air, we call it air, call it the breath, the oxygen, whatever is holding the person up, that is something shein bo mamish. It doesn't have substance to it, so he holds that's not good mechitza. It has to have something that's physically able to stand by itself. If it has to have the ruach chaim in order to stand up, without the life spirit, it's going to die. It doesn't make a difference if it's a wind or it's a life spirit, whatever it is. The point is that there's something which is no mamashes to it, no physical substance that needs it in order to stand up. Since it's a mechitza which has to have a ruach in order to make it stand up, so it's not a mechitza. And the other said, and therefore, not only Rabbana, not because it's going to run away, even if, according to what comes out now, even if there's no chash is going to run away, or that it's going to fall down, it's not a mechitza because it's being held up by, or that no chash is going to die, even if it's going to surely live, there's no problem. There's still it can't be a mechitza with the raisa because it's being held up by spirit, where air. Others have a different version in the same words. This is Rav Acha bar Yaakov. Some say a little different version. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, same person. Very similar, but they say that it has to be made by man. And this is called not made by man. The fact, it's a little, I don't understand it. Someone asked me a question, I don't have an answer, that why is it not called a Sui B'dei Adam? Any kind of mechitza, when you bring it, you erect it, you bring it from someplace else to stand it up over here. That's called a mechitza Sui B'dei Adam. Here, if you take the animal and bring it over here, even though the animal itself was not made B'dei Adam, but you're bringing it here, is that not enough? But it seems not. I don't know the answer to that question. Let's put a side point on that. But since it's not man-made, so it's not a good mechitza. So according to both of these shratim, with the rice, it's not a good mechitza. Or males with the rice, it's not a good mechitza. The Gemara finishes off to say a nafkamina between these two understandings in Rabbi Meir. My benayu. What is the difference between these two versions of Rav Acha bar Yaakov? Is it because it has ruach, it's omedus b'ruach, or is it because it's en asui b'dei adam? The Gemara says benayu the ukma b'not of ruach, that you stood up the wall, you erected the wall with a note of ruach. A note of ruach we could say is a balloon. A note is like a jug. Tefuach means blowing up. We call it a balloon nowadays. I want to have these things, these blow-ups, like they even have how do they make these sukkahs nowadays? The pop-ups? How does it work? How does a pop-up work?
Obviously, it springs.
But once it stands up, then it's a regular mechitza. But let's say they have these blow-up things, not a pop-up, but a blow-up that like they have these trampolinas they create for the kids. They blow it up. So that would also fall the note of according to the mandama that says that if you're standing by wind, the Gemara says that wouldn't be good. Or you could take a simple case, you blow up a balloon, whatever, you blow it up, and that's going to be the wall or supporting the wall. So according to the version that Meir holds, it can't be standing by ear. That's called that it's being held up by ear, and it wouldn't be kosher. The madam mechitza medes b'ruach in mechitza, arei medes b'ruach. The madam ein asui b'dei adam, arei asuya b'dei adam. If the only problem is that it has to be put there by man, so man put it, he blew it up, or he put the wall on, he did it. But if you hold that the fact that it's held up by wind, that's a chisaron, so then it wouldn't be kosher. All this is not relevant to halacha because we pass like Rabbi Yehuda. Whatever the pshat is, no shema tivrach. Maybe they say in the poskim that after everything's over, even though Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of this, he doesn't hold the problem. This problem is Rameir's problem. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold of it, and he doesn't care that you could use a blow up sukkah. You could blow it up, but they do talk about the whole sukkah before that we just deleted. It could be Rabbi Yehuda also holds to that, even though he doesn't hold the problem of the inherently. There's no inherent problem of having the mechitza held up by wind or the fact that it's not man-made. That's okay, but that it has to be no chash is going to run away. Probably does. You have to tie it up. Or maybe even that the Yehuda will say, if it'll run away, I'll notice that it runs away. I'm not going to be choshesh. It's not necessarily true that Yehuda has to be choshesh and mativrach. If it walks away, as long as it's here, it's here. When it walks away, I'll stop eating. I'll stop. So that the post can talk about. If the maskana, you also have to tie it up or suspend it in order that it shouldn't sit down. All these things. So it doesn't happen too often at this point. But just to point out that it does happen sometimes. I was told by relatives that once they were in a sukkah that wasn't kosher. It was a community sukkah that wasn't kosher. So they told the man to stand in a certain place, that the man, without knowing it, he made it kosher. It says that by that mechitza of a human mechitza. The sukkah is talking about an animal. That the post there's not a gemara in Eruvin where it talks about a human mechitza. Over there it says he has to not know that he's being made into a mechitza. I forgot the details. Maybe it's only on Shabbos and Yantif. I forgot the details, but they did. You could use a human mechitza also. So based on this, the Rebbe was saying not the same way. Also can't use a behemoth because medas beruach. You can't use a human also. The Gemara talks about someone walked out of the tchum. If you recall, someone walked out of the tchum and they wanted to bring him back in, so they made a mechitza, a human mechitza, and they brought him in like that. I've got the name over there. Not Nechemia. So Nechemia. So this halacha we pass that the mechitza which is held up by wind or in a suy by the other masol kosher. We don't pass like a mayor. But there still might be a chash about what the Gemara says, that the post can talk about, maybe still have to be concerned about. The rest of the Gemara now until the Mishnah is a bonus, that it said in the Brisa that besides Rav Meir's chashas about mechitza, alechi, asik biros, we just finished now about a tumas golol also, but it says that if Yosef Lili holds, there's another point that you can't write a get on an animal. And that the Gemara it's not a subject at all. But once you brought it in, the Gemara is going to discuss it also. It's not the same subject. That isn't the same issue. Talking about a mechitza. It's not a mechitza. This you need a piece of paper in order to write. So if he wants to write it on the animal, the horn of the animal, whatever it might be, why not? Amamar. We learned earlier, Mishim of Yosef Lili Yom, often koson all of Gideon Lashon, that you're also not allowed to write a get on an animal. My time of Yosef Lili, why not? The Tanya, Sefer. It says in the pasuk, because of law Sefer Krisus. It says when a person wants to divorce his wife, he says he should write a divorce document, Sefer Krisus, but not somebody other. She could be married. So it says in the Sefer, because of law, Sefer Krisus. Sefer. Only Allah Sefer. The word Sefer, this Brisa takes to mean parchment. Rashi says the thing they usually write, a scroll. So that means that what you usually write on, which is parchment or whatever, paper. So you might think that only that's kosher. Only Allah Sefer. Only if you write on paper or scroll or cloth, parchment. When I was called up, anything's good. You can write on anything. Along with a cause of law, it could have been differently. It could have says v'nasan sefer krisus v'yada v'nasan. Right. It could have skipped the word v'kasav. So why does it say v'kasav? Because of law, he should write. And since it says a word because of law, so that we could say it implies any kind of writing, however you write it. There's no dafka restriction to dafka write it on cloth or paper. You go mokum, whatever you write it on. So then the kasha is and came out of Sefer. If right away the pasuk is going to say write it and anything, so what does the pasuk mean to exclude? To that says dafka sefer. Sefer is very limiting. It sounds like only paper. I've called up it has to have two conditions in order to be kosher to write it on. It has to be not a living thing, and it shouldn't be a food. It shouldn't be a food. It has to be something which doesn't have living. I don't know why. If you'd ask us, what's the characteristics of cloth in that we'd say that this is the characteristic, this is the thing that defines it. I don't know if we would come to this conclusion, but the Gemara says that's what the cloth is coming to exclude. It has to be similar to cloth in the fact that it's not a living thing, and also it's not a food. Those are the restrictions of Rabbi Yosef Lili. And that's why he gets that you can't write it on an animal, because animal is a living thing. You would say also you can't write it on food either. So that's not our subject now, but that's what Rabbi Yosef Lili holds. We hold not like that. We hold like the Rabbanan. You can write it on an animal also. It doesn't have, we didn't hold of this. And the Gemara goes back and forth. The rest of the Gemara is the drushes back and forth. So Allah cleared his mutter, right? Allah cleared his mutter, right? There might be an issue. I think the Gemara Gita that talks about if he doesn't want to give it the whole animal, he just wants to write it, and then he's going to cut off the horn. and then give it to the wife, that might be an issue that there's mechusa ktsitza, that there's something in between. But if you give her the whole animal, then this is the sugya. I'm just saying out of my head. I didn't look it up now, but I think there is such an issue. Of course, people don't do this nowadays. They go to the Rabbanut and they're not going to have any animals over there. They're going to have a sofa with a cloth or whatever they use, paper and paper. You know, doesn't have to be cloth. Doesn't have to be cloth. But this halacha doesn't usually happen. But it might happen in the case where somebody's in a place where he doesn't have any. Could be that wants to help out his wife, even that it shouldn't be an agun, whatever the case might be. So we hold he could write a get on anything, and we don't hold like a basic leader that says that the exclusion would be that has to be not something which is living and also not a food. But the Gemara is going to, the rest of the Gemara now is going to go back and forth with the drushes, which happens very often. Whenever you have a drusha, of course, what the Gemara said, it's a drusha. It's not because of a svara. It's a drusha. Because of law, sefer means sefer wants to come to exclude, even though it says anything but the kasav, but the sefer comes to exclude and restrict it to limit it only something which is similar, that it doesn't have living life, and it also is not a food. Rabbana, what are Rabbana going to do with that drusha? How come they don't darshan like that? Isn't it a good drusha? Rabbana are going to say no. Because of bisefer, if it would have said the word bisefer, because of love, bisefer increases. That would have meant that it's coming. The word sefer would have meant the scroll that you're writing it on, the paper that you're writing it on. Because of love, bisefer, then he should write it in the. Then you say, I would agree to you that the word sefer means a parchment. Then kill the comment, you'd be right. But Hashid the stiff sefer, this fears the al muda says. That means the text. He should write a text of divorce. That there's in the words that he writes, it has to imply that he's telling her that they're not married anymore and she can marry somebody else. So it's not coming to tell you the word sefer, the parchment is coming to tell you not what you write it on, but what you write, what he's supposed to write, the context of what he's supposed to be writing, content of what he's writing. But Mara's a kasha now on Rabbanan, that's very nice. Okay, we got that. But Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he said that the word sefer would have meant after klav, and then it says because I have to be marba more than klav, and then you have to explain if everything's mutter. So then, what is the word sefer coming to exclude? That was his drasha. Rabbanan say now there's no limitation at all. Sefer doesn't mean that. Sefer just means to write the words. So it doesn't say what to write out and all. So now the kasha is what do you have to have a kasav law for? Rabbanan have a kasav my dashi be. If according to basically, sefer would have sounded very limiting. So you have to have a kasav in order to broaden it, and then there's only one thing that's going to be excluded. But according to Rabbana, nothing's being excluded in the first place. So why do you have to write the kasav in order to broaden anything? Nothing in itself is limiting. Nothing's limiting in the first place. It doesn't say the word sefer. It doesn't say parchment. So why do you have to have the word kasav to be marba more? So you need a drush for the word kasav. The answer is only boy the pasuk kasav is saying the only way to divorce is only by a document. It has to be a divorce document. There's no other way to divorce. You might have thought that you could divorce by giving money also. The same way that kedushin, marriage, just happens through money. So you might think that divorce also can happen through money. The same way he gave her money and say, be married to me, he could give her money and say, be divorced from me. You might think, you might think, all the iskish, yitzia lavaya. The word yitzia means, like it says havaya here means it says she should leave when he gives her a divorce. She leaves him and she goes and she can marry somebody else. The word marriage over there is expressed in the word she should become somebody else's wife. So, and it says in the same place, she should leave him and go to somebody else. So that's called hekish. Iskish, you see that there's a comparison between the divorce and the marriage. You might think, and there are many things that the Gemara does use that comparison. The fact that it says it together, the Gemara does learn out things from the comparison of a divorce contract and a marriage contract. But you might think also, you might think the same way getting married is through money, so too leaving, divorce also can happen through money. That only with a document could a divorce take place. Rav Manuel, you want to say something?
You taught Rashi's Pashat that it says Litain law kesef l'shem gerushin, but the Sfas Emes has a good taina from a star shikra of an Eved. He says, why shouldn't it be the other way around? That since you gave her money to marry her, she should have to give you back the money to get divorced.
Mm-hmm. That's a little difficult. I hear it's a little difficult because the divorce has to be that he's divorcing her. She doesn't divorce him. He's the one. She doesn't have power to divorce. He's the one who has power to divorce. So it'd be strange. She doesn't. First of all, she doesn't have to want to in the first place. So the divorce would be his act of divorce. So I hear the taina, but I don't hear how it would have worked. But okay. But the one says this is not true. There's no such thing as a divorce through money. So the pasuk is b'kasav. Now the Gemara turns it back. It goes back and forth. He used up already the pasuk b'kasav to tell you that you can write it on anything, even not cloth. So how come? From where is he going to learn this halacha that the only way to divorce is only through a contract and not a document, not from other ways? Rabbi Yosef the high formula. Use the pasuk already. So how is he going to know this halacha? The answer is Sefer Krisus Nafkalei. Sefer Karsa Vendav Karsa. It's true that the word Sefer is used up already, and he can't. And Vakasav he needs, but to know that it has to be dafka a document and not another way of divorcing is because Sefer Krisus. Sefer Krisus. Sefer means the document that he says the paper over there. That's the only way to separate the Krisus. That makes the separation, and there's no other way to be divorced. There's no other way to separate the marriage besides Sefer. The Idach. What did Rabbanan do with that drasha? Now, each back and forth. If he has a drasha for this, what does he do? So, Rabbi Yossi Aglili says that he can learn out from this pasuk of Sefer Krisus. He can learn it out. So he doesn't need a pasuk of a kasav to tell you dafka b'ksiva and not another way. So why do Rabbanan need so many psukim? No, I need a pasuk for something else. There's another halacha they learn out from this pasuk that there's not allowed to be any indefinite bond that's going to connect them even after the divorce. That means that even though there is such thing as making a condition, you can make a conditional divorce, but it can't be indefinite. It means it can't be any condition that's going to bond her forever to the contract. And here gives an example. There has to be something which is a complete separation. It could be a condition. It could even be a temporary condition, but it can't be indefinite. If he makes it, he gives a divorce to his wife on the condition she doesn't drink wine, or on the condition that she doesn't go to her father's house anymore. So if it's la'olam, if you made this condition to be indefinite forever, never could drink wine anymore, never could go to your father's house, so then ain't a krisus. It's not a good get because it doesn't separate. They're never separated. She's indefinitely bound to him because of this contract and the marriage, whatever. It wasn't a complete separation. So because is a krisus. If it was only a temporary condition for 30 days, whatever, it could be 60 days also. Now definitely not only 30 days, but it has to be something which comes to an end. So then so what do you see? That this Allah tells you that has to be a complete separation. It shouldn't be she's still bound to him. And they need the pasuk of Sefer Krisus to say that it has to be dafka, something which is kores. So now the Gemara turns it back on Rabbi Yosef Aglili Idach. How does Rabbi Yosef Aglili not learn out? Why doesn't he learn out? Or where does he learn this halacha from? The answer is kores krisus. It says Sefer Krisus. It could have been shorter because because Allah Sefer kores. Which also would have meant the same thing. Why does it say Sefer Krisus? To tell you a riboy that it's coming to tell you this halacha. The halacha we said before that it has to be dafka Sefer kores, so no other way to divorce besides the document. And also tells you this halacha also that he can't have any kind of indefinite bond. And the Rabbanan, how come they can't dash in kores krisus? That it says a long version of the word kores. Kores krisus like dashing. They don't say anything. That's the way you say. They don't say. The Gemara sometimes says that it's a way of talking, and there's no drasha to say because it says an extra two letters. That's not enough to darshan because that's the way you talk. Kores krisus like dashing. They don't see any readboy in the word krisus more than the word kores. So the truth is that all these halachas everybody agrees to. The only question was where you learn it out from. Everybody agrees you have to have a definite split. It can't be that she's indefinitely bonded to him. Everybody agrees that it has to be dafka with a divorce document, not with any other way of money. The only machlok is that it came down to the beginning is if you have to have, if you could write it on a davar sheish b'chaim or food. But basically, he excludes that a divorce can be written on anything besides a living being or food. And Rabbanan held it to me. We passed like to Rabbanan that there's no exception at all. You're allowed to write the divorce contract. So with that halacha, the Mishnah spoke about. We spoke about having a sukkah on a wagon, having a sukkah on a ship, having a sukkah on a camel, and the Mishnah says everything is kosher. The only issue we had about going up on Yontif or not, that the Mishnah said it depends if it's you're not allowed to climb an animal or a tree on Shabbos and Yontif, but it is kosher for the rest of the week, and that's how we paskin. The Gemara before also spoke about the sfina. We hold it is kosher on top of the boat, even though it's windy, as long as it can stand in a regular masuk, the abasha, the old sukkah Yivasarai. And the last one we just said now was that using the animal as a wall for a slip. We pass like Yehuda that is kosher, and we don't hold like a man of Yehuda, a mayor, who says that sukkah medes beruach or ena sui b'deodim is not the mechitza. We hold that it is.
Excuse me, Rebbe.
Yes, please.
In this last thing about the drasha mikoros krisos, what is the pasuk?
Because of Allah, Sefer Krisus. Maybe Rashi
It just uses the word krisos, and it could have said kores.
Right, and some say that that's a drasha. That's room for drasha. Because
room for drasha because it could have said
it in a shorter version.
Thank you.
But Rashi is a Rashi here. The Matzi Lemifta Sefer Kores. It could have said for Kores, and the is not considered an extra long version of the word in order to darshan, or some say you don't darshan that.
It says Sefer Krisos, not Sefer Kores.
Right. In fact, that it could have said it shorter. Is that room for a drasha or not? and a little bit more till the end of the page. Or maybe we have time. Maybe we could even go a little till the next Mishnah. Not easy Gemara. Also, because of any Elanas, we learn as Tanis Lapsheva. Here, the case is that he made a sukkah between the trees. The trees are the walls. They're not holding up the schach. That's not the subject over here. The walls could use trees to be walls. We had before you could use anything for trees, but the Gemara is going to say there's a chiddush that you could use trees for walls. The Gemara starts. That's going to be the issue. That's what I was going to talk about. Maybe on Shabbos, I was going to say. Okay, thank you. So what do you have here? In between the trees.
See the picture. Oh, it's a picture. Yeah, there's trees. Wow. It's almost like a tree.
And they cleared away on top. There should be room for the schach, because if it's going to be shady, then from the trees, then it's not a good sukkah. So they took away there's nothing blocking it on top. But it doesn't need any walls. The trees themselves are the walls. Yeshikah. So it says it's kosher that if the walls are the trees are the walls, it's a kosher sukkah. Any mechitza, that any partition cannot stand in a regular wind, is not a good partition. We had before the sugya about in the yam. If you hold the US Kaaba, you have to have that it should be able to stand in the ruach mitzu of the yam, and whatever you are. If you're on the Bala Yam, it has to be able to stand over there. You don't pass like that. You pass that it's enough to be ruach mitzu of the Abasha, but that must has to have. It has to be able to stand in a regular wind. Tanan, and the Gemara thinks that the trees, I don't know why the Gemara assumes so, in the picture that they made is very big trees, but and nothing's moving over there. But the Gemara thought that the trees are shaky trees, and the Gemara says that these trees probably shaking the wind. Tanan, no, this is because of any of learners. We learn this Tanis Lapsheva. Our Mishnah does learn it. If you make a sukkah between the trees are the walls. It's kosher. Because of Vasi, it goes back and forth. The trees shake. If you talk about bushes and things like that, so then it's not going to be able to stand. When the wind blows, the mechitza falls apart, so to speak, that they separate from each other more than 3 tefachim, and it's not a good mechitza. It's talking about that it's hard, big tree, hard trees, sturdy trees. They don't move in the wind. The Ikanofo, the Gemara says that probably using the branches also are part of the trees, not so much like the picture. The picture showed like the trunks themselves is the mechitza. But the Gemara says a lot of times you'll be using trees that the branches also, and the branches do shake in the trees, in the wind. So according to you, it's not good mechitza. When the wind blows, it takes part of mechitza, so it's not good even when it's still standing. The answer is you had to be that you intertwined it in a way that we had before. Yes, here the trees. What do we see? Could you tell us what we see close up? Those are the trees. You see some of the branches, and the rest of it is greens and stuff. And those greens, the Gemara says it has to be that you tied it up in a way that it's not going to fall apart in the wind. When the wind's going to blow, it's not going to blow it in a way that it's going to be not a good mechitza. Yashikah. It's almost going up north already. If anybody needs a vacation, you just come to the shir over here. Then the Gemara says, then it's so simple. If the Mishnah doesn't tell us anything, the Mishnah says that why should trees not be good? If you're saying that it's not blowing in the wind, and even the branches are not blowing in the wind, so the Gemara doesn't see any chiddush. Of course, trees are good for walls. What's the chiddush? The Gemara says, in the weekday, it wouldn't be a chiddush, but on Shabbos and Yantiv, the luck is that you're not allowed to climb the tree, you're not allowed to even put things on the tree either. So you might think if the trees are going to be your walls, so on Shabbos and Yantiv, you might put something down on the tree to hang up. You have a towel or something like that. So you'll put it onto the tree, did Avera. And in order to avoid, to make a fence, people shouldn't come to do that. They might say, don't use such a sukkah. There's no chash. The truth is that you're not allowed to use the tree, but there's no chash you're going to do it. So it is a kosher sukkah. And on Shabbos and Yantiv, be careful that you're not going to use the tree. The Gemara goes on a few kashas. The same kashas is going to be again and again. The Gemara thinks all these following prices that it's made out of material that's going to blow in the wind, and it's not going to be a good mechitza. And the Gemara says no, it's talking about that. It's sturdy in a way that it's not going to blow, and that's the halacha. It has to be able to stand by ruach mitzuya. Tashma, it says in the brisa, Hayisham ilan or gader or mechitza sakanim lidin misham dyumid. It's not talking about sukkah over here. It's talking about dyumdin. We have dyumdin is by pasi biros on Shabbos that you want to be able to draw water from a bore into the Rishus HaRabim, and you can't because the bars are Rishus HaYachid, so make a mechitza around the whole area, and then you'll be carrying from Rishus HaYachid to Rishus HaYachid, and they don't have always wood with you in order to make such a good mechitza. Rabbanan said you could rely on the Raisa, which is to have the 4 corner pieces, which are Amma by an Amma and 10 tefachim tall. It's a good mechitza. But the Gemara thinks, so here it says you keep a tree. If you have a tree in the corner, or a fence, or mechitza sakanim, it's just a partition made out of kanim. It sounds like it's something natural. It's not you made a partition out of reeds, but it grows that way. The Gemara says chitzas kanim. It grows in a bundle of reeds together, and that happened to be growing over there. And it says that you could use that as a diumen. And the Gemara thinks it blows in the wind. It's just reeds. It blows in the wind. Hasamnami davale. They take out the word mishum. Hasamnami davale v'tzavadafna. The case is that you tied it in a way that it's not going to move. Hutza v'dafna, again, hutza means lulav branches, palm branches, and dafna is some kind of branch of leaves of other tree. And in other words, you also made it that it's not going to blow. If it blows, and when it blows, it's not good mechitza. It's not a good mechitza when it doesn't blow. Tashma, another similar kasha. It's
sometimes possibly rice has to be on an angle, right?
Right.
So even though the trees are normally round.
Right. That the Gemara says that we say chokikim hashlim and cholkin v'chokikim. I forgot the exact words, but it's true that if you have a diameter which would be enough, or a square diameter that would be enough to be able to carve it out to an amma by amma, it's good even though it's not carved out. And here the Gemara thought that it's shaking in the wind. It's chitzas akanim. It's just reeds that are on the shape, and or you can carve it out, but it's blowing back and forth. Then Gemara says no. It's still not a case that you timed it up in a way that it's not going to blow. Tashma, third kasha, similar kashas again and again. Ilan amesach halor. Say you have some kind of a willow tree. I never saw one. They show one in the pictures, but in actual life, I never saw one. That you have a tree that the branches fall over and they come willows, a weeping willow, but that's so much that you can have a machitz all around. You go under the tree and you have a machitz all around you from the willows alone that come within 3 tefachim of the ground. I'd like to see such a tree. Like I haven't seen one.
Yeah, they're quite common in South Africa actually. They actually fall onto the ground or normally even into the water.
And
So
very thick. What would you say? Has a lot of leaves that they'd be within three tefachim of each other and 3 tefachim to the ground. And
Yeah.
inside they have a very nice. Okay, if anybody has any pictures, they made a picture over here. Probably Leib Yaakov, did they? But that's probably something just a painting artificial.
They did. No, they made a picture, but it's going to be the answer. So should I show it now?
Okay, well, let's go a little further. And if you have any natural pictures, Gadi, that also would help us to get more vivid impression of what the Gemara is talking about. Here it says, if you had Ilan Amesach Halos, you had a tree that was, what would we say, sheltering over the ground, like a willow tree. If the branches are not high, when the branches fall over, they branch out and they come down to the ground. If they're not higher than the ground within 3 tefachim, so then you're allowed to have a room inside there, a big room. The Gemara talks about a big room under the tree, and that's going to be a rishus hayachid. And the Gemara says that these branches, these willow branches, they blow back and forth. The branches go back and forth, and it's not omid ruach mitzuya. The Gemara says here also the same terrace again and again. The case also would be that you also intertwined it with branches or palm branches, other kinds of branches that also would hold it in place, and it's not going to blow away. Here it is. So this is looks like palm branches, but it doesn't probably don't. There's no such palm tree like that, but it's probably like some kind of willow. So this is like just somebody's imagination, and it's within 3 tefachim of the ground. The whole thing is here. We're not talking about schach. Here we're talking about Shabbos. This is a tree, so it's not kosher schach. This is just talking about that's rishus hayachid. It's not talking about hilchos sukkah, this brisa, because like as they're saying that it would be not kosher schach. It's mechuber. It's not Shabbos. You go under there. So you see that it's within 3 tefachim of the ground.
I see. If the walls are movable, then it's not a good domain.
If when the wind blows, everything just falls apart and blowing in the wind, so then it's
not a domain. Yeah.
Even when it's calm, even when there's no calm, even when there's no wind, but since in a regular wind it would blow apart, there wouldn't be a good mechitza. Here, what are they writing? The picture shows that they tied it down. That's interesting. Why they tied it down? So
that it doesn't move. Wouldn't that be so that it doesn't move from side to side?
Yeah. The Gemara, it's true, but the Gemara doesn't talk about making pegs, and they made a very fancy thing. The Gemara talks about that they intertwined it with also palm branches. You hear that the whole tree picture is palm branches. It was supposed to be some kind of a willow tree. The palm branches, I don't think any palm tree goes like that. But good, if we get it from South Africa, that'll explain it. Okay.
Can you just ask Gadi if that's what it looks like in South Africa?
Gadi, is that what it looks like?
Not really. I'll show a picture soon.
Okay, if you could. Okay, thank you. The Gemara has one problem with this teretz now. The Gemara's a problem with this. That if everything's very nice as far as the mechitza, he made a good mechitza now, but it's such a good mechitza that the Gemara doesn't understand why it says now that there's limitation on this kind of mechitza, which makes it rishus hayachid under the tree. that it says, it's only good if it's less than a basis sign. Basis sign we had in Maseches Shabbos Eruvin, that it means the area of 100 by 50 amos, which comes out, let's say 70 by 70 amos. If it's bigger than that area, that was the size of the Chatzar Mishkan. The courtyard of the Mishkan was 100 by 50, and it says that that's the maximum that you're allowed to have, that this area should encompass, should enclose. If the tree is bigger than that, it sounds like a very huge tree, that it encompasses more than 70 by 70 amos. That's like 35 meters. It's very big. But if it's bigger than that, then you can't carry under it. And the Gemara doesn't understand. If it wouldn't be such a good mechitza, like we thought that it wasn't, we might have thought that even though it blows in the wind, it's still a good mechitza. And there's a limitation that he shouldn't use it for a full-fledged mechitza if it's bigger than such an area. But if you say that you made it, it didn't happen by itself, you made it, and it's holding sturdy, so why should there be a limitation that it's only good until the size of base of sign? Once it's base of sign, it's not good anymore. If that's so, you should be allowed to carry as big as it is. Ella base of sign. You're only allowed to carry in there if it's not bigger than a base of sign, which is 100 by 50 amos. And now that you're saying that it was man-made, so to speak, that you manually made Dutzev Adafna and made that it should be a sukkah, the more doesn't, you made a mechitza, the more doesn't understand why should it be limited to a base of sign. The answer is, the purpose of this room was not to live under it. Even if you have such a room, it's only going to be used in order to be able to be in the field and to watch the field that you're guarding. And that's called the mechitza shetashmish alavia. The dira shetashmish alavia. It's a dira which its function is for outside the dira. So it's not called a full-fledged dira. Dira is only when you're living there because you want to live there. I want to have these enclosures because I want to be here. If you're only here because you want to watch the field that's outside, that's not called a full-fledged dira. It's not called mukaf ladira kind of thing. And you're limited to have base of sign. Once it's water base of sign, it's not good anymore. But the more still holding on to the yesod again and again, that's only mechitza for only beruch mesuya. I think it's last kasha. One more kasha. Tashva Shabbos betel. Shabbos means that he spent Shabbos. His Shabbos came upon him. It's called Shabbos in a tel. These are all kind of natural mechitzas. A tel chukava sarah. On a mound. He's on a mound, a natural mound, which is 10 tefachim off the ground. So that 10 tefachim is a mechitza, and it's 10 tefachim off the ground. And also, it's me'aba amos bad basis sign. It's less. It's more than 4 amos. If it would be less than 4 amos, then you don't any have to call it that you're allowed to carry there. You're allowed to carry there even if it's a rishus rabim. But if it's bigger than amos until basis sign, again you're going to be limited to basis sign. The neka. The word here is neka. The word neka means like some kind of a natural crevice or
ditch. We could call it a ditch.
Good, okay. Again, Stephen for 10 tefachim, so it's a rishus yachid. And how big is this? Again, we have an amos vad basis sign. It's at least 4 amos. If it's less than 4 amos, you don't need any mechitzas. So be looked at to carry there, even if you don't have a rishus, you don't have 4 amos. Even if you don't have the mechitzas, but it's 4 amos and not more than basis sign. Again, once it's more than basis sign, we're not going to allow you to carry there. You're in a wheat field, and they cut down the wheat, some of it, and some of it is still standing. All around, you have the shibolos, you have the wheat that's still around, standing, but you have part of the field that's cut down. And over there, if you look around you, you have the wheat plants are very tall, they're 10 tefachim high. And you are inside encompassed by a surrounding wall, the wall of the wheat. Is that a good mechitza? So one says yes. Malachis kula, all that becomes your rishus. I was not talking about. When I was saying it over, I was talking about carrying. So I take it back. I'm not talking about carrying. You're talking about tchum Shabbos. That where do you start your tchum? So your area that you're enclosed in is called your area. That's called like base. That's your house. And from there, you're allowed to count. Walk another 2,000 amos past those limits. So it says this whole area, the tail, the neka, the kamaksura, all these 3 examples is considered your area. You're living over there. When Shabbos, you spent Shabbos. When Shabbos came in, the nightfall came upon you. You were inside this enclosure, so it's called that this is your house, so to speak, and you have the whole area to walk. And from there, you start counting 2,000 amos. And again, the one is asking, Afagav, because of Vasi, that all these things are shaking over there. Maybe not the neka and the tail, but the kamaksura, the last case. You have wheat field, so the wheat blows in the wind. So why it's not good mechitza? When the wind blows, it falls down. So even when it's standing, when the wind stops blowing, it shouldn't be a good mechitza because it doesn't stand with ruch masiyah. And the answer is, here also it's talking about dafka in the case where you tie it up in a way that you may palm branch, whatever it is, and make sure that it doesn't fall in the wind. So that's the halacha. Taisa has the kasha over here that why is the more not say then it should be kosher even more than basis sign. Taisa says because it doesn't have a roof. That's anybody can look at Taisa to see this point. But as far as the Gemara goes, we finished, and the halacha is that it's true what the Gemara said, that it's only good mechitza if it's only Ruach Mitsuya. If it's not only Ruach Mitsuya, it's not a good wind. There are two interesting points to talk about. Machlokes the Chazon Ish and the Mishnah Berurah. We said the other day, if it's not blowing because you're surrounded in a courtyard, you're in a courtyard, you have a sukkah in a courtyard, let's say, and because you're in a courtyard, buildings all around, so there's no wind, and it stands very nicely. Yashikov. That's the willow.
I do have a picture here, if I can share it.
Wow. Yeah, that looks very real.
This was mine.
Also very real. Okay.
Yeah.
Yashikov.
Oh, this one, yeah.
Guys,
Yeah.
it's like a weeping willow.
Yeah, weeping willow. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so we have such a case. So the halacha comes out that it has to be able to stand in a ruach mitzuya. So we have just mentioned machlokes. The Mishnah Berurah says that even if there's no wind, because you happen to be surrounded by buildings, wherever it might be, he says that's not good enough. It has to be, if there would be a wind, if there'd be no buildings around you, it should be able to stand in a regular wind. Both the schach has to not blow away in the wind, and sometimes people don't realize that even though it's calm, the whole sukkah is because they're in a courtyard. But if there would be no buildings around, so the Mishnah Berurah is machmir the Chazon Ish, I think that he's makel on that. That you don't usually have the Chazon Ish, he's makel also. There's another issue they talk about. If you're surrounded by buildings, and that's why your sukkah is not shaky,
Like here.
it's able to stand. Right, all these courtyards, you have buildings all around, so there's no wind.
There's no wind.
So you say, "Wow, I'm over the Ruach Mitsuya." If you'd be out in the Chaniyah where there's no buildings around you, it would be a lot of wind. So
That's a Ruach Mitsuya.
Ruach Mitsuya. So there's a Ruach Mitsuya. It's Ruach Mitsuya that's right here on the
It's not
Yabasha.
here.
But someone's blocking it because you have the buildings all around. Is that good enough? Mishnah Berurah sounds like not. That it has to be able to Ruach Mitsuya without the buildings around you. Is it right? There's
How can
another-
that be? That doesn't make sense, does it?
Why does it? Which way?
Buildings, the buildings are permanent.
What?
The buildings are permanent, so why would the Mishnah Berurah not think that that's called
Yeah,
Mitsuya, that there's no wind there?
It's permanent, but it's not that the sukkah walls are not the strong ones. It's just you took away the wind. It's just a way of artificially taking away the wind. So that's not necessarily being a criteria. They're not being down on the sukkah. Are the sukkah walls strong enough to stand in the wind? It's just took away the wind. You made that there's no wind. You took a shield and made that the wind. He's saying it's a permanent shield. Okay, I'm not saying that the Achronim seems to speak about it. The Mishnah Berurah seems to be machmir, and Chazon Ish says no to lahakel. There's another interesting.
In
Yes?
other words, we paskin diras arai. Diras arai has minimum conditions, and it doesn't meet the minimum structural conditions.
No, you do need. You surely did. It's a idea, but you have to have mechitza at this ruach mitzuya. That you do need. The question is, what's called the ruach mitzuya? And now everyone agrees you have to have a ruach mitzuya, able to say the ruach mitzuya. But Chazon Ish will say that in this place, the ruach mitzuya of this place, it's able to stand because they took away the wind. And the Mishnah Berurah says they didn't have discussion with each other, but the Mishnah Berurah seems to say that it does took away the wind, but it can't stand the ruach mitzuya. You have inside your house, you can have a mechitza because there's no wind because you're inside your house, but there's no wind because you close the windows. But if there be a wind, it's not able to stand. So machlokes achronim. One more interesting point is about the prefabricated sukkahs that they do blow back and forth. Like they blow 3 tvachim, but they don't go off the floor. They tie it on top and on bottom, but they sway back and forth. Is that a problem? It sways 3 tvachim back, go 10 tvachim back and forth. Is that a problem? So the Chazon Ish seems to say it's not a problem because either way, whenever it blows one way, the other way, but it's always a good mechitza. When the Gemara says it shouldn't go sway back and forth, that only means that when it sways, it's off the ground. Either the leaves separate from each other 3 tvachim, or it comes off the ground 3 tvachim in a way that when it blows, it's not a good mechitza. But if no matter how it blows, it's always a mechitza. I don't care if it's to the east or to the west. Your prefabricated sukkahs is the flapping back and forth. But whatever is flapping, it's always a mechitza. So he says that it's a good mechitza. And I think Chazon Ish. So I think people don't have that impression. They think that it has to be so taught that it shouldn't flap back and forth. The Chazon Ish says the only pay is it shouldn't flap off the ground. It shouldn't flap up. And the way that it's not going to be a mechitza when the wind is blowing. But if it's a mechitza, even when the wind is blowing, no matter how it's also a good enough mechitza.
Rebbe, the way I heard it was that the first 10 tefachim cannot sway 3 to either direction because 10 tefachim is the minimum share.
I was coming lafuki from that. I was going to say the opposite, that it is good. And if you could find who says differently, I'd be interested. I think the Chazon Ish says that is good. He doesn't care that it flaps back and forth, even the bottom 10 tefachim, because it's a good mechitza. It could flap this way, flap that way. You have 10 tefachim the whole time. What's the difference which way is flap? You could have made lechatchila slanting walls, right? Let's say you make sturdy slanting walls to the slanting out or slanting in. They're all good. What's the difference if it goes back and forth? As long as it's a mechitza at all times. The svara seems to be very strong.
That hagufa, the machloikas, that it's it's not called machitza if it's so it's not stationary and if it's outside of 3 tefachim, it's not called stationary.
So L'chorah, the one who's going to say that it's not good, Allah of Lavi Raya. He's the Chiddush. Chiddush is the one who says that it's not good. Okay, Yashikach, everybody.
If he gets a mazel tov.